By the time of World War I, one line of artists embraced the machine aesthetic in their versions of the illustrated book. Futurists and Bauhaus artists are among those who can be considered to have reinvented the concept of illustration. Central to their production is the continued debate: is text or word more powerful or important than image? Italian Futurism in the decade before World War I emerged and had ramifications for movements such as Dada, De Stijl, Bauhaus, Constructivism, and Supremativism. The poet F.T. Marinetti's seminal work, Zang Tum Tum, of 1914, represented experiences in images made from type. Marinetti's long career blended the arts, journalism, and politics, and early in 1914 he arranged to be a poet war correspondent in the Balkan Peninsula, the hotbed of conflict where World War I actually ignited. Words as language are freely used in the poetry, breaking linguistic and poetic conventions. Marinetti and the Futurists directly challenged two previous movements, especially naturalism and symbolism, which dominated the commercial and critical culture of literature and book illustration. Appropriate to Marinetti's illusion of the barriers between text and image, the design of the book likewise is freed not only from, quote, the shackles of syntax, grammar, and punctuation, but also, according to Jeffrey Schnapp, from the chains of typographical standardization. The subtitle, Adrianople, October 1912, signifies the reportage of a specific event witnessed in his role as poet correspondent. Marinetti collaborated with the typographer Cesare Cavana, who did much of the design and would later work with Fortunato de Pero, who we will discuss later. Marinetti argued that language needed to explore new realms and to intermingle with other sign systems such as music, logic, and mathematics. His images move beyond Apollinaire in that these are attempts to reproduce sounds as well as forms. The initial edition ran as low-cost industrial paperbacks in 10 short chapters that record the Bulgarian attack on Adrianople in 1912 in several of the chapters, but other remote locations in the remainder. Marinetti also reimagined the work in several media. Tum 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 Bombardment was the first section of Zang Tum Tum and first appeared as a supplement to Luigi Russolo's March 11, 1913 manifesto, The Art of Noises, Futurist Manifesto. Zang equals the sound of artillery shell. Tum equals explosion, and tum used instead of tum in this T-U-M-B in this portion, held out, if you hold out the sound, suggests that sound of an echo. Bombardment was a pivotal piece in the Words and Freedom movement and was translated in many languages and performed in venues across Europe and even Brazil. Marinetti's performance is akin to that of the Dada at Café Voltaire, which began in 1918. Marinetti also edited Nuovi Poeti Futuristi in Rome in 1925. The form of this book is broken by pages that fold out. Not only this one that's being shown, but also Treno in Corsa by Cesare Simonetti. Alan Bartram describes Treno in Corsa as attempting to, quote, reproduce the sound of a steam locomotive hissing and puffing at the beginning of its journey before rumbling across clacking rails and points. Bartram points out that it is neither concrete poetry nor related to Apollinaire's calligrams. Lissitzky and constructivists Theo van Doesburg and De Stijl carried out similar experiments with typographic pattern making as replacing traditional illustration in text. A different aesthetic prevails in a collaborative project between Gilbert Clavel and Fortunato de Pero, but also raises the collaboration and interrelationship between text, image, and performance. Gilbert Clavel and Fortunato de Pero met through work for the Ballet Russe in Paris. Clavel was a professor of Egyptian history, a researcher, but also an avant-garde writer with an appreciation for the arts. Fortunato de Pero was a young futurist painter who had commissions for the Ballet Russe, which had been performing in Paris. Clavel invited de Pero to do the illustrations to the dreamlike text, testing out different types of death offered by a suicide service: alcoholic intoxication, carnal pleasure, drug overdose. The text draws on both knowledge of Egypt and early Freud, and in its subject matter and illustrations defied bourgeois morality. During the 1920s and 30s, there are another series of shifts in book illustration propagated by the Bauhaus. The initial aesthetic is hard to read as an illustrated book. What exactly is the function of image or text here? More important is the designed aesthetic of the book layout, which is striking. Yet how do the images operate with text? What is the function of this book between promotion, explication, or introduction of new trends at the Bauhaus? The Bauhaus books elevated the rise of the designer. To achieve the layout, a sophisticated understanding of printing techniques was required, and the potential of the machine was exploited in a variety of ways. The aesthetic promoted abstraction, rejecting German taste for folk motifs, organic and animal imagery, historicizing forms, papers, and layouts. The aesthetic went countercultural to the rising nationalist cultural program in Germany between World War I and World War II. The principal collaborators in the production of Bauhaus books were Laszlo Moholy-Nagy and Herbert Bayer. In their books, they sought to make the space on the page dynamic and eliminated capital letters as well as the signaling of new paragraphs with indents or line spaces. They deployed a cutting-edge sans serif typeface with aggressive heading types, strong geometries, and large numerals. While the early Bauhaus books look like exhibition catalogs, some of their books devoted to one artist or one discipline can be considered as innovation in the tradition of not just design, but the concept of the illustrated book. Die Bühne am Bauhaus, Bauhausbücher 3 is a volume dedicated to the stage and theater with schematic drawings, photographs, charts, and tables interspersed with text to consider Bauhaus designs for the theater. Moholy-Nagy's Vision in Motion of 1946 continued many of the ideas of the Bauhaus. The illustrated work is an assertion of the ubiquity of design in all things and one great problem: design for life. Surrealism demonstrates a remarkably different aesthetic, but also one where collaboration and cooperation between artists is central to the concept of the book illustration. Max Ernst and Paul Eluard's Repetitions of 1922 is an example of where collage and collaboration were foundational to their movement and deployed in innovative developments in the illustrated book. In collage, they erase differences between media by fusing multiple genres in one image. Repetitions explores various uses and unexpected nuances of this term. Hubert explains that, quote, Ernst states and prolongs in his collages what Eluard depicts in his poems, or conversely, Eluard develops what Ernst has assembled. Thus neither artist gains, so to speak, an edge on the other. Originality and imitation, inspiration and interpretation belong equally to both. Paul Eluard likewise collaborated with Man Ray. The layout breaks away in facile from conventional margins and alternates between lead taken by author and text, or artist and image. In Max Ernst's Count on Me, from Dream of a Little Girl Who Wanted to Become a Carmelite, what we see is an illustration of a dream of a girl who loses her virginity on the day of her first communion and represses her desire by determining to become a nun. Voyeurism is rampant, as the title suggests, and evident in this image as the secular man takes on the pose associated with males depicted in visual culture as entranced with an Orientalist fantasy of desire. The format of the book looks conventional enough until certain interruptions and interventions occur. For instance, the captions fit the Victorian style, but then are ironically pretentious. Ernst, unlike the Futurists or the Bauhaus, deliberately takes on and subverts the tradition of the 19th century book illustration and bourgeois morality. He shocks through inappropriate juxtaposition of sexual desire of the young woman in the setting of a Carmelite convent. Likewise, Ernst's story-carrying illustration in Semaine de Bonté, A Week of Happiness, anticipates the future in the graphic novel. The Surrealists also appropriated the Gothic novel as the subject of illustration, collage, and painting. Dali and Man Ray, for instance, each realized the popular Gothic fantasy by Isidore Ducasse, Count de l'Autre-Amont, in book or image. Salvador Dali's illustration to the Songs of Maldoror is shown here, as is Man Ray's Enigma, also which takes on this text. Surrealism was the life work of André Breton. The poem Object shows a gradual shift from literature to visual arts to object and raises some of the issues that will carry into contemporary artist books. A poem object is a reversal of the traditional notion of the book. The image-text relationship becomes a sculptural collage art objet rather than a personal interaction.